Hello, everyone. Welcome to Flower Power Live on the road from the beautiful state of Oregon. Let me just check real quick. I'm outside and I just want to make sure I got a microphone. I got everything going. Looks good. So hello again and welcome to this on the road version of Flower Power Live. I'm so excited to be out here in my native state of Oregon, where I grew up. And so the thing is that I'm outside, so you may hear some car doors slamming and honking horns and whatnot, but it's been incredibly hot here. And so to me, of course, what I immediately think is, oh, the poor plants. The climate change is pretty obvious around here, and we've seen a lot of plant damage as I've been traveling around in the Portland area. And over millennia, plants have adapted to a particular area, and when the climate changes so suddenly from what it's been for thousands, hundreds of years, it's very difficult for the plants to adapt. And one of the plants that has not done that well in this extreme heat is something that Oregon is quite famous for, and that is different kinds of berries. And today we're going to be talking about one of those berries in particular, the blackberry. And I had actually planned on doing blackberry because I knew they're in season right now. They are a wild kind of naturalized plant around in this area. And sure enough, when I arrived at my Airbnb, what's growing out in the backyard? A blackberry. This particular one has been pruned back a fair amount by the people who own the building. But I saw that as a good sign that I should be doing blackberry for you this week. So now blackberry is both cherished and loathed in Oregon because, like I said, it's very invasive. It has really strong canes that are difficult to pull out, lots of thorns on it. And but I have lots of childhood memories of like anticipating blackberries getting ripe. And so we would go out, we'd put on our like long sleeved shirts and our long pants and hike down to the blackberry patch in the hot weather just to take a step into the brambles and harvest these delicious, incredible berries. Now, I have to admit that never once, even with the long sleeve pants, shirts, whatever, did I ever avoid actually getting gashed up at least once by the berries themselves. They obviously want to protect their fruit, and they do a very good job of it. Now, rubus species is rubus is the genus, and the species, there's lots of different sort of cultivars and varieties that kind of intermingle. And so a lot of times you won't see a species name associated with a blackberry, although the one that's naturalized here is called the Himalayan blackberry. I don't know if it's actually from the Himalayas or not, but that's what it's called. And they have these huge long canes that can grow up to almost 20 feet long in 1 year. And they put out a cane, they can get super big around once they're a perennial, so they're continuing to grow from year to year and keeping their canes. And it's the second year growth that puts on the actual berries. So if you do decide to grow some blackberries, because they're so good, you luckily now there's a lot of cultivars that are not as aggressive, not as invasive, that you can purchase. And I believe this one that I got at the local natural food store here is called Chester, and that's one of the newer varieties that they have out now. And let me just tell you, it is so good. So you can avoid these bloody gashes by just picking a little bit less aggressive cultivar, whatever grows best in your area. So like I said, for medicinally, we're gonna focus on more of like the wild blackberry today. They're definitely an important foraging food for both people and animals, because who doesn't like blackberries, right? Now, the blackberry medicinally or traditionally is known for use as more of an intestinal medicine, and primarily for diarrhea. And I came across an interesting story of how during the Civil War era, especially the Confederate troops, they were not able to get access to the medicines that they were used to. And so they called upon this local, I'm not sure if he was a doctor or a professor, to help them determine what could we use in our camps, in our medical camps, to help our soldiers. And one of the main things about the Civil War, and probably a lot of wars, is that a lot of people were not dying from actual, wounds due to battle. They were mostly dying more to disease, such as diarrhea or infections from wounds, or just other types of diseases that were around at the time. And so they call this really bad diarrhea was called the bloody flux. Like, do you really need to, like, just the name of it is TMI, right? But they were able to use the local blackberry root. The root is the strongest part for this. They would dig up the root and they would make a decoction, which is where it's kind of like a tea, but you actually boil your root for roots and seeds and nuts. A lot of times you boil it for a longer period of time, so it actually extracts the goodies out of it, as opposed to just pouring boiling water over it. So they make a decoction, and that was help a lot of the people that had this horrible diarrhea infection. Now, some people might have not have had it that bad, so in that case, you could just use the leaf. And so the root was the strongest, they had the canes, they had the leaves, and so depending on the level of illness, they would choose a different part of the plant to use to help treat this condition, and successfully. Another use of the plant is, which I thought was so interesting to say, now this is my ripe blackberry, but the berry itself goes green, sets green, then it turns red, then it finally ripens to black. And so you can harvest the red berries before they're fully ripe and make those into a like a syrup. And they would use that for children mostly that had like a lactose intolerance when they were young, like a milk intolerance, and that was very helpful. And then another thing is that it was also used for, since it's helping regulate flow, it's an astringent properties that it has. So since it's regulating flow, it can also be used for menstrual flow, or just to help regulate that. Now, we usually think of raspberry as the most common, the cousin, to be used for more feminine type of issues, uterine toning and things like that. But in this case, the blackberry is very similar. And they also would use it, and I don't know if they did this during the Civil War, but it could also be used as a poultice for abscesses and other types of wound. And if you look at the size of that leaf, I mean, that's pretty good size. You could just sort of soften this, maybe put in a little bit of boiling water, dampen it down, maybe crush it up a little bit, and then lay it right on a wound. Now, one interesting thing that I was talking about with the heat this year is that when I found this plant in the backyard, I noticed that the berries had just literally dehydrated right on the stem. You can see, I've never seen this before, where they just turned brown, just dehydrated right on the stem. And a lot of the leaves, they're supposed to be flat. This one was out in the sun. This was down in the shade a little bit more, so you can see how they're just kind of curled up and just kind of crispy. So they're not doing so well this summer. Now, one of the great things about blackberry is it is a wonderful flower essence to work with, because even though it's considered an invasive weed, it actually is incredibly beneficial as a flower essence. And according to FES, this has a lot to teach us about developing motivation and tenacity to bring ideas into manifestation, to overcome inertia, procrastination, and get things done. I think we can all use some blackberry flower essence on occasion. Now, the other resource I like to consult whenever I'm using some sort of fruit flower essence is the Essential Flower Essence Handbook by Lila Devi. Now, I don't have it with me because I'm traveling, but her work is really focused on flower essences from edible, well-flowered fruits. So fruits mostly, like avocado, coconut, she does flower essences for those. And so this is what she has to say about the blackberry flower essence. The positive blackberry state offers the vibrational experience of clarity, focus, and the ability to see things as they really are. This is the antithesis of darkness. Clarity is the antithesis of darkness. Focus instead of mental cloudiness. And the ability to see things as they are is the opposite of denial. So that is a way to just kind of, because you can say, oh, well, I don't want to procrastinate, but what are the things that you need to know to be able to move forward from something? You need to have clarity, you need to have focus, and you need to see what's really going on. You need to be able to see things as they are. Then another thing that I like, she said, was when we judge or blame ourselves, or we have a sense of like uncleanliness, or we're not proud of things that we've done in the past, this is a good time to use Blackberry, because we need to let go of those things and move forward. But a lot of times we feel guilty, or we still feel attached to them because we're not proud of what we did. It helps us to see events as dreams that have ended, and allows us to move forward with a clean slate. So everyone can use a little help in that area at all times. Now, the Oracle card is from the Herbcrafter's Tarot. Again, Herbcrafter's Tarot. And the card itself is from the Major Arcana. It's the Devil. Now, most people, when they think of tarot cards, are like, oh, they have the devil and death and these cards that, you know, have very negative kind of connotation to them. But we have to realize that when we're using these cards, we're really looking at, you know, the more metaphorical experience as part of our life. Death is the dying of something that we want to let go of, and the rebirth of some new path we want to go on. Things like that. It doesn't actually mean someone's going to die. In this case, a lot of people get freaked out by the devil, but in what the card means in the traditional tarot basically means that it represents that you're being seduced by the material world and the physical pleasures. Okay. And absolutely the Blackberry, I love that they chose Blackberry for this, because Blackberry is definitely quite seductive. We are willing to climb through a giant bramble of thorns and rip up our body to get the delicious fruit. Now, this is kind of the message from this card today is, what are you doing? What are you allowing to happen just to get to this fruit that you want? Now, the card itself is showing, of course, a blackberry pie with the brambles kind of all around. There's some blackberries here in a bowl, and it's obviously going to be a delicious and nutritious meal. This, of course, reminds me of my dad, who is a master of the blackberry pie. So let's take a little bit look a little bit closer at what the card message has to say. And the card is really about knowing what is keeping you in bondage, in not that kind of bondage, but in bondage, or an indication that it's an indication that maybe you're feeling a little bit trapped in your current circumstances. So specifically, you might be so focused on the material desires that you have that you are willing to, say, work a job that you hate just to have the money to get the car, for example. Are the things that you're doing for these material desires, are they actually serving your highest good? Are these things that you need to let go of? How are you going to untangle yourself from these brambles once you have the clarity, right? The clarity to see whether or not that's good or bad for you. So this really message is about awareness, and just make sure that you're not just setting your sights on some shiny object just because you think it looks good. Now, I have to argue a little bit in favor of some of these things, or give a little nuance to it. In the case of the actual blackberry, when we are willing to go through brambles to get the shiny object, the beautiful blackberry, the delicious blackberry that's sensually satisfying, it's also nutritious. So this is not saying that things that you want, material things, are not acceptable, but it's just asking you, are you getting hurt, or are you being prevented from moving forward in a certain realm of your life because you're stuck on obsessing about this delicious, shiny, luscious object that you're really focused on? So it's just a time to kind of take a look at that and decide, am I procrastinating moving forward? I kind of know this isn't good for me, but I really like it. So take a look at that this week. That is your message. Make sure your shiny object is not only beautiful, but it is nutritious. And that's our message from Blackberry. Blackberry, it's a nice plant. So nice of it to be here just for my show. So thanks so much for joining me. And if you don't follow me yet on Instagram, my handle is Cultivate My Life. And that's also my other social media handles on Twitter as well. So hope you'll see me there. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Bye-bye.